The air inside the Rustwing bar tasted like recycled oxygen, burnt ionic residue and beer that had been watered down 3 times over. It was the scent of the Nimbus Spire's lower decks, a smell that clung to the fabric of jumpsuits and settled into the pores of the skin. For Caleb Hart, it was the smell of home, or at least the closest thing to home he allowed himself to have these days. Caleb stood balanced on the 3rd rung of a rusted aluminum ladder. His upper body disappeared into the guts of the ceiling ventilation unit. His fingers, stained with grease and hydraulic fluid, deftly manipulated a stubborn gasket. Below him, the Friday night crowd was beginning to swell. Gas miners fresh off the shift were loudly trading credits for synthetic ale, their voices a rough chorus against the hum of the station's atmospheric cyclers. "Hey, Hart!" a voice bellowed from near the jukebox. "Are you fixing that fan or just hiding from the tab you owe me?" Caleb twisted a wrench, feeling the satisfying click of a lock nut settling into place. He pulled his head out of the ceiling, wiping a smear of oil from his cheek with the back of his hand. He looked down at Jax, a burly freighter pilot with a beard that looked like it could trap small birds. "If I owed you money, Jax, I would be hiding somewhere better than a ceiling vent in the Rustwing," Caleb called back, his tone light. "Besides, if I do not fix this intake, the CO2 scrubbers will back up, and you will all pass out before you finish your second drink. Just looking out for your investment." A ripple of laughter went through the nearby tables. Caleb descended the ladder, collapsing it with a metallic clatter. He hooked it under his arm and made his way behind the bar, sliding the tool belt off his waist and tossing it under the counter. To the casual observer, he was just Caleb, the guy who fixed the pipes, wiped the tables, and occasionally poured drinks when Garen, the owner, was busy counting inventory in the back. He was the station's handyman, a fixture of the background as essential and overlooked as a support strut. That was exactly how he liked it. Caleb grabbed a rag and started polishing the synthetic wood of the counter. To his right, a cluster of patrons had formed a tight circle. The hushed, reverent tones of their conversation caught his ear. It was the kind of tone people used when telling ghost stories. "I am telling you, kid, you do not look her in the eye," an old miner was saying. His name was Silas, a man who had spent 40 years breathing gas fumes on the outer rim. He was leaning in toward a terrified-looking rookie, his weathered face illuminated by the flickering neon of a beer sign. "She is not like us. The Falari, they have got instincts. Predatory instincts. I heard she ripped the airlock door off a shuttle once," the rookie whispered, clutching his mug with white knuckles. "Ripped it off," Silas scoffed, shaking his head. "That is the gentle version. Listen to me. 2 cycles ago, a merc from the core systems tried to get fresh with her. Just touched her tail. Just a graze. They say she moved so fast the security cams only caught a blur. Next thing anyone knew, the guy was pinned to the bulkhead with a shattered collarbone, and she was not even breathing hard." Caleb suppressed a sigh as he scrubbed a stubborn stain of blue liqueur from the bar top. The Legend of the Catwoman, he thought. Season 3, Episode 5. "They call her the deadliest on the Spire," Silas continued, his voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. "They say, she is deadliest, she will kill you alive. She does not just kill you. She plays with the fear first, makes you wish you were dead before she finishes the job." Caleb stopped scrubbing for a second. "Kill you alive." It was a grammatically nonsensical phrase that had somehow caught on in the lower decks. It sounded more like the tagline of a bad holofilm than a description of a mercenary pilot. He knew the type of stories that circulated on space stations. Boredom was the mother of exaggeration. If a pipe burst by the time the story reached the next deck, the station had almost imploded. If Sasha Nerith pushed a drunk off her by the time it reached the Rustwing, she had eviscerated a battalion. "Quit scaring the boy, Silas," Caleb said, sliding a fresh bowl of salted protein chips toward them. "You are going to make him spill his drink, and I am not cleaning it up." Silas glared at him. "You laugh, Hart. You are just a plumber. You do not know what it is like out there in the soup. That woman flies the storm edge. No human stays sane that close to the hollow gale. That storm changes things. Change people. The storm is just wind and lightning, Silas, Caleb said softly, his eyes momentarily unfocusing. Just pressure differentials and thermal exchange. Yeah, tell that to the ones who do not come back. Garen emerged from the back room, carrying a crate of fresh coolant for the taps. The owner was a large man built like a blast door, with a permanent scowl etched into his features. He slammed the crate down and looked at Caleb. "Stop chatting and check the pressure on tap 4, Garen grunted. Then, noticing the topic of conversation at Silas's table, his expression darkened. He leaned over the bar, lowering his voice, so only Caleb could hear. "They are right, you know," Garen muttered. Caleb looked at his boss surprised. "You too, Garen. I thought you were immune to station gossip." "It is not gossip when I have seen the way she looks at people," Garen said, wiping his hands on a greasy towel. "Cold. Like she is calculating how much you are worth as spare parts. Listen to me, Caleb. If that Falari walks in here tonight, and she might because the storm season is picking up and the hunters are returning, you steer clear. Let me handle her. Do not try to be charming. Do not try to be funny. Just stay away. The ones who survive around her are the ones who make themselves invisible." "Invisible," Caleb repeated. "I am good at invisible." "Good," Garen said. "Keep it that way." Suddenly, the floor beneath their feet gave a lurch. It was subtle, a vibration that traveled up through the soles of their boots and rattled the glasses on the overhead rack. The lights in the bar flickered dim to a dull orange and then surged back to full brightness. The conversation in the bar halted for a second. "Orbit adjustment," someone shouted from the back. "The pilot must be drinking too." Laughter rippled through the room, anxious but dismissive. Everyone went back to their drinks. It was Nimbus Spire after all. The station was old, hanging precariously in the upper atmosphere of the planet Azura. Shakes and rattles were part of the charm. But Caleb did not laugh. He stood perfectly still, his hand resting flat on the bar top. He closed his eyes, tuning out the noise of the crowd, focusing entirely on the vibration humming through the metal. Frequency is off, he thought. Orbit thrusters have a rhythmic thrum, 3 beats per second. This is irregular, sharp, staccato. It was not a thruster firing. It was a pressure wave hitting the lower stabilizers. Without a word, Caleb moved to the end of the bar, where the manual override valves for the room's localized dampeners were hidden behind a decorative panel. He popped the panel open. The gauge needle was jittering in the yellow zone. Caleb. It was Juno sitting on a stool near the service station. She was a hydroponics botanist with bright green dye in her hair and dirt permanently under her fingernails. She was his best friend on the station, mostly because she was the only one who didn't ask about his past. "What are you doing?" "It was just a thruster bump." Caleb didn't answer immediately. His fingers found the primary flow regulator. It was stiff. He applied steady, calculated pressure, turning it exactly 45 degrees counterclockwise. He watched the needle settle back into the green. The subtle vibration in the floor smoothed out, becoming a hum rather than a rattle. "Just giving the station a little antacid," Caleb murmured, closing the panel. "She is just burping," Juno chuckled, shaking her head. "You treat this station like it is alive, Caleb. You worry about it like people worry about their pets. Or their bonsai trees." Caleb forced a smile, picking up a rag to wipe his hands. "Someone has to. If the spire falls out of the sky, where am I going to get decent nachos?" "You are weird, Hart," Juno said affectionately. "A weird, overqualified janitor." Caleb's smile didn't reach his eyes. Overqualified. If she only knew. The vibration had triggered a memory, sharp and unwelcome. The scream of tearing metal. The red strobing of emergency lights. The way the floor had pitched violently to the side, throwing him against the console of the Helios array. He could still feel the phantom sensation of gravity, failing the cold grip of terror, as the numbers on his screen turned into a death sentence he couldn't rewrite. He shook the memory off, shoving it into the mental box where he kept the ghosts of 312 people. Not today, he told himself. Today, you are just Caleb. You pour beer. You fix leaks. You survive. The door to the rust wing hissed open. It wasn't a normal opening. The atmospheric pressure differential sucked the air out of the room for a split second, popping ears. A gust of wind, cold and smelling sharply of ozone and charged static, swirled into the warm, stale air of the bar. Silence swept across the room like a wave. The laughter died. The clinking of glasses stopped. Framed in the doorway stood Sasha Nareth. She was Falari, and she was imposing. She stood nearly 6 feet tall, her posture radiating a coiled, lethal grace. Her skin was covered in a fine, velvet-like fur patterned in shades of storm cloud gray and charcoal. Her eyes were large amber gold with vertical slit pupils that were currently dilated, taking in the low light of the bar. 2 triangular ears atop her head swiveled independently, catching every hushed whisper in the room. A long, sinuous tail flicked behind her, the tip twitching with agitation. She wore a pilot's flight suit that had seen better days, scuffed leather, reinforced plating on the chest, and shins and dust from the storm layers clinging to the fabric. A heavy blaster pistol hung low on her hip, the holster worn smooth from use. She did not look like a person. She looked like a weapon that had walked in off the battlefield. Caleb felt his stomach tighten. He remembered Garen's words. "She is the deadliest. She will kill you alive." The patrons nearest the door scrambled to make space, pulling their chairs in, averting their gazes. It was a reaction of pure primal instinct. A predator had entered the watering hole, and the gazelles were making sure they were not the slowest target. Sasha stepped inside the door, hissing shut behind her, cutting off the wind. She paused, her amber eyes scanning the room. Her gaze was not hostile, but it was intense, analytical. She was assessing threats. She was looking for exits. Caleb watched her from behind the safety of the bar. He saw something the others didn't. He saw the way her left shoulder slumped slightly, favoring a bruise or a strain. He saw the slight tremor in her hand as she adjusted her glove. He saw the dilation of her pupils, not just as alertness, but as exhaustion. She wasn't hunting. She was tired. Caleb's instinct was to retreat. He should go to the back room. He should let Garen handle this. He should be invisible. But then Sasha moved. She didn't head for the dark corner booth where solitary drinkers usually hid. She walked straight toward the bar, straight toward him. Her boots clicked rhythmically on the metal grating of the floor. Each step was deliberate. The crowd parted for her, creating a wide berth. She reached the bar and hopped onto a stool directly in front of Caleb. The action was fluid, almost liquid, her tail curling around the leg of the stool to anchor her. Up close, the monster looked even more formidable but also more real. Caleb could smell the scent of ionized air clinging to her fur, mixed with the metallic tang of ship coolant. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on the bar. Her claws, sharp and retractable, tapped a slow rhythm on the synthetic wood. Click, click, click. She looked up at him. Her eyes were pools of molten gold, terrifyingly intelligent. "Pour me something humans drink when they have had a long, stupid day," she said. Her voice was a low rasp, like gravel sliding over velvet. It carried a strange accent, a rolling of the R's that was characteristic of her species. The bar was silent. Everyone was watching, waiting for the explosion, waiting for the kill-you-alive part. Caleb stood there, rag in hand. His heart was hammering against his ribs, a frantic rhythm. Run, his brain said, "She is dangerous. She is bad news." But then he looked at the specific way she held her shoulders tight, up near her ears. It was the posture of someone carrying the weight of the sky. He knew that posture. He saw it in the mirror every morning. Caleb reached under the counter. He bypassed the expensive imported whiskey that mercenaries usually demanded to prove their status. He bypassed the rot-gut vodka that people drank to forget. He pulled out a brown bottle with a peeling label. Old Earth Stout. It was thick, dark, and bitter. It was what he drank at the end of his shift. He cracked the cap off on the edge of the counter, a practiced casual motion, and slid the bottle toward her. He didn't pour it into a glass. "You didn't drink this stuff from a glass." Sasha stared at the bottle. Then she looked up at him, one ear swiveling forward in curiosity. "No glass?" she asked. "Less to wash," Caleb said. His voice was steady, surprising even himself. "And it tastes better out of the bottle. Oxygen ruins the carbonation profile." Sasha picked up the bottle. She examined the label. "This is cheap stuff." "It is honest stuff," Caleb replied. He picked up his own half-finished bottle of the same brand from under the counter and set it down next to hers. "It does the job." The silence in the room was deafening. Garen was staring from the other end of the bar, eyes wide, silently signaling Caleb to back away. Sasha looked at Caleb's bottle, then at hers. A flicker of something crossed her face. Surprise amusement. "You are a brave little man," she murmured, bringing the bottle to her lips. She took a long pull, her throat working. She lowered the bottle and let out a soft exhale. "Or a stupid one." 50-50 split, Caleb said, leaning his hip against the back counter. "Depends on the time of day." Sasha narrowed her eyes at him. The vertical slits thinned. "Do you know who I am?" "I know the stories," Caleb said. "And..." She leaned in closer. The smell of ozone was stronger now. "Aren't you afraid I will kill you alive?" Caleb looked at her. Really looked at her. He saw the fatigue etched around her eyes. He saw a lonely creature who had just spent 12 hours wrestling a storm and just wanted a beer. "Well," Caleb said, gesturing vaguely around the bar. "If you kill me, who is going to fix the ceiling fan? You cannot sit under it if it drips condensation on your fur. That stuff matters, doesn't it?" The room seemed to hold its breath. Had he just insulted her? Had he just signed his death warrant? Sasha stared at him, unblinking. The seconds stretched out taut as a wire. Then a sound broke the tension. A short, sharp exhalation. A snort. Sasha's lips curled up at the corners, revealing gleaming white teeth. It wasn't a snarl. It was a smile. "It does matter," she admitted, her voice losing a fraction of its edge. "And it is a nightmare to comb out." The tension in the room snapped. The ambient noise of the bar slowly returned, though people kept their voices low, stealing glances at the impossible scene, the terrifying Catwoman, and the maintenance guy discussing fur grooming. "I am Caleb," he said. "Sasha," she replied, taking another sip of the stout. "You are not a bartender, Caleb. You hold that rag like it is a wrench." "I am the guy who keeps the lights on and the air flowing," Caleb said. "Bartending is just recreational." "The air flowing," Sasha murmured, her gaze drifting toward the ceiling, as if she could see through the hull plating to the storm raging outside. "The air is angry tonight, Caleb. The spire is fighting it." "I felt the shake," Caleb said, his tone turning serious. "The dampers are working overtime. The frequency was wrong. Too sharp." Sasha looked at him with renewed interest. "You felt the frequency." "I have good ears," Caleb lied. It wasn't his ears. It was his bones. It was the engineer in him that felt the stress loads in the metal, like his own joint pain. "It is the hollow gale," Sasha said quietly. "I was out there near the rim. The winds are shifting. They are not following the models. The currents are..." She gestured with a clawed hand, a fluid, chaotic motion. "They are hunting." Hunting. "Storms on Azura are not just weather," she said, her voice dropping so only he could hear. "Sometimes they feel like they have an appetite. And tonight they are hungry." Before Caleb could respond, it happened again. Boom. This time, the shake was not subtle. The entire floor of the Rustwing jumped 2 inches. Bottles rattled violently on the shelves, and several crashed to the floor, shattering in an explosion of glass and liquid. The lights didn't just flicker. They died completely for 3 long seconds, before the emergency red reserves kicked in, bathing the bar in a bloody glow. Screams erupted from the back tables. A few patrons dove under their seats. On the bar counter, Caleb's beer bottle slid toward the edge. He caught it reflexively, his hand moving in a blur. Sasha hadn't moved. She sat perfectly still on her stool, her ears flattened against her skull, her entire body rigid. The main lights flickered back on, washing out the red. The hum of the station returned, but it was higher-pitched now, a straining whining sound of metal under immense load. Caleb turned instantly to the pressure gauge on the wall. The needle was vibrating wildly in the red zone before snapping back to yellow. "That was not an orbit adjustment," Caleb whispered. "That was a lateral impact. Something hit the shield grid. Hard." Sasha turned her head slowly, looking toward the far wall, toward the outer hull of the station. Her ears were twitching, tracking a sound that no human could hear. "It is growling," she said softly. "The storm." "The gale," she corrected. "It is closer than they say on the news." She downed the rest of her beer in one swallow and slammed the bottle onto the counter. The sound echoed like a gunshot. She stood up, her tail lashing behind her. "Thanks for the drink, Caleb," she said. She threw a heavy platinum credit chip onto the bar. It spun on its edge before settling. "Keep the change. Buy yourself a new wrench." "Where are you going?" Caleb asked, surprised by her sudden departure. "To check my ship," she said, adjusting her flight harness. She looked at him, and for a moment the predator mask slipped completely, revealing a flicker of genuine concern. "You know Caleb for a guy who fixes pipes. You have steady hands." "Occupational hazard," he said. Sasha smirked. She leaned in her golden eyes, locking onto his. "You should learn to hide when the wind blows, little man," she said. "Or if you are going to be stupid and brave, maybe you should learn to drink your beer somewhere higher up. Somewhere you can look down and see what is actually coming for you." "Is that an invitation?" Caleb asked, his heart doing that frantic rhythm again. "It is a warning," Sasha said, but the way her tail curled at the tip suggested otherwise. "Do not die, Caleb. Good bartenders are hard to find." She turned and stalked out of the bar, the crowd parting for her like the Red Sea. The door hissed open, admitting another blast of ozone, and then she was gone. Caleb stood alone behind the bar, the empty brown bottle in front of him. The station vibrated beneath his boots, a low, constant trembling that hadn't been there an hour ago. "Caleb!" Garen barked from the other end of the bar, looking pale. "What was that? The shake? Is the dampener holding?" Caleb looked at the pressure gauge. He looked at the door, where the Catwoman had vanished. He thought about the tremor in the floor and the hunger Sasha had described. "The dampener is holding, boss," Caleb said, his voice calm, projecting a confidence he didn't feel. He picked up the platinum chip she had left. It was enough to buy a round for the whole house. "But I think we are going to need stronger bolts." He looked up at the ceiling he had just fixed. Somewhere, miles above, through layers of steel and ceramic composite, the hollow gale was screaming. And for the first time in 5 years, Caleb Hart felt the urge to do something other than hide. He felt the urge to climb. He pocketed the chip and grabbed his rag. "All right, folks," Caleb announced to the stunned room, forcing a bright customer service smile. "Show is over. Who needs a refill? I hear the Old Earth Stout is particularly good tonight." The maintenance deck on level 82 was not exactly a tourist destination. It smelled of ozone and cold metal, and the wind from the atmospheric scrubbers created a constant, low-frequency howl that sounded like a distant animal in pain. But it had one advantage: the view. Caleb Hart sat on the edge of a graded walkway, his legs dangling over a drop that would make most people vomit. Below his boots, the Nimbus spire stretched down like a needle piercing the sky, and beyond the hull, The atmosphere of Azura churned in a violent, beautiful tapestry of bruised purples and electric blues. "You picked a high spot," a voice said from the shadows. Caleb did not jump. He just held up a cold can of synthetic lager. "You said I should learn to drink my beer somewhere higher up. This is as high as I can get without an EVA suit." Sasha Nerith stepped out onto the walkway. She was not wearing her flight suit today. Instead, she wore loose cargo pants and a fitted thermal shirt that showed the lean, dangerous muscle of her arms. Her tail twitched as she looked down at the abyss below her golden eyes, reflecting the storm clouds. "It is acceptable," she judged, taking the can from him. She sat down next to him, her movements fluid and silent. She didn't dangle her legs. She sat cross-legged, perfectly balanced, as if gravity were a suggestion she could choose to ignore. They sat in silence for a few minutes, just drinking and watching the lightning arc across the clouds miles below. It was a comfortable silence, the kind that usually took years to build, but somehow between a tired engineer and a Filari pilot, it had formed over a single bottle of stout 3 days ago. "So," Sasha said, cracking the tab on her beer, "is this where you come to hide from the toilets you have to unclog?" "I come here to remind myself that the station is still floating," Caleb said. "Down in the Rust Wing you forget. You think the whole world is just pipes and drunk miners. And up here? Up here you can see the storm. You can respect it." Sasha took a long drink. "Respect. That is a funny word for it. Most people on this station just fear it." "Fear is useful," Caleb said. "Fear keeps you from doing stupid things, like flying a shuttle into the outer bands to salvage energy crystals." Sasha laughed, a low, rumbling sound in her chest. "That is not stupid, Caleb. That is a paycheck, and someone has to do it. The Spire needs power. The core systems run on those crystals." She leaned back, resting her hands on the grate behind her. "You know they call me deadliest because of those runs. They think I am reckless. They think I have a death wish." "Do you?" Caleb asked, looking at her profile. Sasha's ears flattened slightly. "No. I want to live. I am just good at surviving where others aren't. 2 years ago, I took a team out. 4 ships. The wind shear hit us like a hammer. I was the only one who pulled out of the spin. I towed 2 modules back, but on the other ships the wind just ate them." She stared into the purple abyss. "People looked at me when I landed. They did not say, 'Good job.' They looked at me like I had traded the other pilots' lives for my own. Like I was the storm's pet." "People like simple stories," Caleb said softly. "It is easier to believe you are a monster than to accept that the weather is random and cruel." Sasha turned to him, her eyes intense. "And what is your story, Caleb? Why does a man who knows how to listen to the station's heartbeat spend his days wiping tables?" Caleb looked down at his hands. They were scarred, rough hands. Hands that had built things and hands that had failed to hold things together. "I used to work on the Helios array," he said. The name hung in the air between them, heavy and cold. Sasha's ears perked up. "The station that fell. The one that collapsed 5 years ago." "The one that cracked in half," Caleb corrected. "I was on the structural engineering team. Not the lead, just one of the guys who crunched the numbers on the storm shields." He took a breath, the air tasting of ozone. "We calculated the shear limits. We built margins. But we didn't account for a harmonic resonance cascade in the primary struts. I saw the numbers turning red on my screen, Sasha. I saw them, and I froze. By the time I hit the emergency brace protocol, it was too late for Sector 4. He crushed the empty beer can in his hand. 300 people. I walked away without a scratch. Just like you. So I figured I was done with big decisions. I am just a guy who fixes leaks now. Leaks are easy. You turn a wrench, the water stops. No one dies if I screw up a faucet." Sasha looked at him for a long time. She didn't offer pity. She didn't say, "It wasn't your fault." She just nodded. "We are a pair then," she said. "The monster and the coward." Caleb chuckled a dry sound. Sounds like a bad holofilm title. I would watch it, Sasha said, a small smile playing on her lips. If there were explosions. Before Caleb could respond, the station's intercom system crackled to life. It wasn't the usual announcements about shift changes or cafeteria specials. It was the high-pitched, three-tone wail of a localized emergency. Alert! Alert! Structural integrity warning in Sector 7 exterior access grid. Life support compromise imminent. Rescue teams to the staging area. Repeat. Alert. Caleb went rigid. Sector 7. That is the tourist loop, the observation modules. The ones that run on the external rails, Sasha asked, already standing up. In this wind, Caleb was already moving, scrambling up from the walkway. The wind picked up 10 minutes ago. If they are on the outer rail and the locking mechanism jams, the vibration will shear the magnetic couplers. He didn't think so. He didn't weigh the pros and cons. He just ran. They reached the Sector 7 access point in 3 minutes. A group of junior engineers and security personnel were gathered around a sealed blast door, arguing. The air was thick with panic. "We cannot open it," a young woman with a datapad was shouting. "The electromagnetic interference from the storm is scrambling the remote override. We have lost contact with the module." "Who is inside?" Caleb asked, pushing through the crowd. He didn't look like a janitor now. He looked like someone who demanded answers. The woman looked at him, confused by his grays and blues maintenance uniform. A school group, 12 kids, 2 teachers, and a guide. They are stuck on the rail 30 meters out. The wind is battering them against the strut. If we wait for the storm to die down, the metal fatigue will snap that rail, Caleb said, his voice hard and fast. You have to manually engage the secondary clamps at the junction box. The junction box is outside, a security guard snapped. On the maintenance ladder. It is a suicide run in this gale. It is not suicide if you know the rhythm, Caleb said. He looked at the blast door. Open the manual airlock. I am going out. You, the guard scoffed. You are the guy who cleans the rust wing. I am the guy who knows that the clamping mechanism is a hydraulically assisted maglock with a manual bypass valve located under the third access panel. Caleb rattled off, staring the guard down. Do you know that, or are you going to stand here while those kids fall into the atmosphere? The guard blinked. The woman with the datapad looked at Caleb, then at the door. Let him through. Caleb grabbed an emergency EVA harness from the wall rack. His hands were shaking slightly, but his movements were precise. Snap, click, tighten. You are going to need a second line, a voice said beside him. Caleb turned. Sasha was pulling a harness over her thermal shirt. She tightened the straps with practiced ease, her tail curling through the specially designed slit in the back. Sasha, no, Caleb said. This isn't your job. It is not even your species. You are right, she said, checking the carabiners on her belt. It is a human screw-up, but you are going to need someone to hold you when the wind tries to peel you off the hull. And frankly, you look like you are about to vomit. I might, Caleb admitted. Good, Sasha said. Don't vomit in the helmet. Let's go. They cycled through the airlock. The sound of the wind was deafening, a physical blow that rattled Caleb's teeth, even through the helmet of his suit. They stepped out onto the exterior gantry. The world was chaotic. The wind was a solid wall of force, screaming at 200 kilometers an hour. Lightning arced so close the static made Caleb's hair stand up inside his helmet. 30 meters down the rail, a glass and steel pod was swinging precariously. He could see small faces pressed against the windows, terrified. The rail itself was groaning, the metal twisting under the strain. Move low, Sasha's voice came over the comms, clear and calm. Center of gravity, Caleb dropped to his knees, crawling along the grate. The wind tried to lift him, to tear him away from the safety of the magnetic boots. He focused on the rungs of the ladder. 1, 2, 3. He reached the junction box. It was frozen shut, coated in a layer of ice from the atmospheric moisture. "It is stuck," Caleb yelled over the roar of the wind. He fumbled for his hydrospanner, but his gloves were clumsy. A shadow fell over him. Sasha was there, braced against a stanchion, her body angled perfectly to deflect the wind. She reached down with a clawed hand and slashed at the ice. Shk, shk. The ice shattered. "Open it," she commanded. Caleb pried the panel open. Inside, the manual wheel was rusted. He grabbed it with both hands and heaved. It didn't budge. Flashback. The console at Helios. The red light blinking. The lever that wouldn't move. The scream of metal shearing. Caleb froze. His breath hitched in his throat. He was back there. He was back in the moment of failure. The wind sounded like the screams of the dying. "Caleb!" Sasha's voice cut through the panic. "Look at me!" He turned his head. Sasha was staring at him through her faceplate. Her eyes were fierce, glowing gold. "You are not there," she said firmly. "You are here. With me. And those kids are waiting. Turn the damn wheel, engineer." Caleb blinked. The ghosts faded. He looked at the wheel. He wasn't a structural engineer calculating doom. He was Caleb. He fixed things. He gritted his teeth and threw his entire weight against the wheel. He felt a tendon pop in his shoulder. He screamed in effort. Kree-yak. The wheel turned. Once. Twice. Down the rail, a heavy thunk resonated through the metal. The secondary clamps shot out, locking the swaying module firmly against the primary strut. The swinging stopped. The pod was secure. "Clamp engaged!" Caleb shouted, his voice cracking. "Now let's get them in," Sasha said. The next hour was a blur of exhausting, terrifying labor. They had to manually winch the pod back to the airlock inch by inch, fighting the wind every step of the way. Caleb connected his comms to the pod's frequency. "Hello, is anyone there?" a small, trembling voice asked. "Hey there," Caleb said, forcing his voice to be light, like he was just asking a customer for their order. "This is Caleb. I am just fixing the roller coaster. It got a little stuck. We are pulling you in now. It is going to be a bumpy ride, but the brakes are good. I just fixed them myself." "Are we going to fall?" the child asked. "Not today," Caleb said. "My friend Sasha is out here too. She is a cat, and cats always land on their feet. So since we are with her, we are fine." He heard a faint giggle. "A cat." "A very big, very grumpy cat," Caleb said, glancing at Sasha, who was hauling on the winch cable with strength that seemed impossible for her frame. "I heard that," Sasha growled over the comms, but there was no bite in it. When the airlock finally cycled shut behind the pod, Caleb collapsed against the wall. He slid down to the floor, his helmet banging against the metal. His hands were shaking so hard, he couldn't unclip his gloves. The inner door opened. Medics rushed in. Parents and teachers were crying, hugging the children who spilled out of the pod. One little girl, no older than 7, stopped in front of Caleb. She looked at his dirty suit, his exhausted face. "Are you the roller coaster man?" she asked. Caleb managed a weak smile. "Something like that." "Thank you," she said. Then she looked at Sasha, who was leaning against the wall, looking like she wanted to be invisible. "Are you the cat?" Sasha looked down. The scary predator mask was gone. She looked awkward. "Yes," Sasha said. "I am the cat." The girl reached out and tentatively touched the fur on Sasha's arm. "You are soft." Sasha froze. Then slowly, she knelt down. "So are you. Be careful where you walk, little one." The medics ushered the girl away. Caleb and Sasha were left alone in the airlock corridor. Caleb looked at her. She was covered in ice crystals, her fur matted with frozen condensation. She looked magnificent. "You did good, Heart," she said quietly. "I froze," Caleb said. "Out there. I froze." "But you moved," Sasha said. "That is the only part that matters." By the time they got back to the Rust Wing, the story had already mutated. "I heard he jumped from the gantry onto the pod," someone was shouting as they walked in. I heard the Catwoman pulled the whole pod back with her teeth. The bar went silent as they entered. Caleb walked with a limp. His knee had banged against a stanchion, and Sasha was nursing her right arm. Juno was behind the bar, covering Caleb's shift. She looked at him, her eyes wide. "You are an idiot," she said as he approached. "A brave, spectacular idiot." "I just turned a valve, Juno," Caleb said, sliding onto a stool. His adrenaline was crashing, leaving him hollowed out. "Don't give me that humble maintenance guy act," Juno said, slamming a fresh bottle of Old Earth Stout in front of him. "I saw the telemetry. You were in the red zone for 40 minutes. She looked at Sasha, who had taken her usual seat next to him. Juno hesitated. The fear was still there, the ingrained prejudice against the deadliest. But then, she saw the way Sasha was holding her arm, the way she looked just as tired and battered as Caleb. Juno set a bottle down in front of Sasha. "On the house," she said gruffly. "For assisting staff." Sasha looked at the bottle, then at Juno. She dipped her head in a small, respectful nod. "Thank you." Caleb took a sip of his beer. It tasted like life. It tasted like not falling. "So," Sasha said, "is this what heroes do? Drink bad beer and look brooding?" "I am not a hero," Caleb said quickly. "I just knew the system." "You knew the system," a new voice said. They turned. A man was standing at the end of the bar. He was tall, dressed in the crisp, clean tunic of the science division. He had glasses, and the sharp, inquisitive look of someone who spent his life dissecting data. "Arden Imani," Caleb said, recognizing the station's lead atmospheric scientist. "To what do we owe the honor? The toilets in the labs are working fine, I checked." Arden didn't smile. He walked over and sat down next to Sasha, ignoring the way the nearby patrons flinched. "I watched the rescue logs," Arden said. "You bypassed the maglock manually. But the way you did it is the sequence you used to stabilize the hydraulic pressure while the clamps engaged that is not in the maintenance manual. That is a design-level override." Caleb went still. "I read a lot." "You do not read that," Arden said. "You have to understand the stress tolerances of the alloy intimately. You have to know the harmonic frequency of the storm to time the engagement." Arden leaned in. "I looked up your file, Mr. Hart. It is very thin. Suspiciously thin for a man who moves like an engineer and thinks like a physicist." "I am just a handyman," Caleb said, his knuckles turning white around his beer bottle. "Maybe," Arden said. He pulled a data chip from his pocket and slid it across the bar. "But the hologale is changing. The data I am seeing is unprecedented. The models are failing. If the storm does what I think it is going to do, the automated shields won't hold. We need people who understand the storm not just as numbers, but as a system. A living system." He looked from Caleb to Sasha. "You," he said to Sasha, "you fly the edge. You know the texture of the wind." "I know it wants to kill us," Sasha said flatly. "And you," Arden turned back to Caleb. "You know how the station feels when it is afraid. I need you both at a briefing tomorrow. 800 hours, science deck." "I have a shift," Caleb said. "Garen needs the filters changed in the kitchen." "I already spoke to Garen," Arden said. "He says you are fired if you do not go." Caleb looked over at Garen. The big owner was pretending to clean a glass, but he gave a subtle nod. "I do not do briefings," Caleb said weakly. "I do not do science anymore." "This is not science, Mr. Hart," Arden said, standing up. "This is survival. The storm is coming, and I think you are the only one who knows how to talk back to it." Arden walked away, leaving the data chip sitting on the bar, like an unexploded bomb. Caleb stared at it. He felt the cold creep of the past wrapping around his throat again. He had spent 5 years running from being the guy in charge, the guy who made the calls. And now, one act of kindness, one moment of stepping out of the shadows, had dragged him right back into the light. "He knows," Caleb whispered. "He suspects," Sasha said. She picked up the chip and turned it over in her claws. He sees you, Caleb. Just like you saw me. I cannot do it, Sasha. If I go back into a control room, if I have to look at those screens again. Then don't look at the screens, Sasha said. She placed her hand over his. Her paw was warm, the fur soft against his scarred skin. It was a grounding weight. Look at me. Look at the beer. Look at the problem. Why do you care? Caleb asked. You could just walk away. You are a pilot. You could leave the station before the storm hits. Sasha looked around the bar. She looked at Juno, who was laughing with a customer. She looked at the miner she had scared earlier, who was now asleep at a table. She looked at the ceiling Caleb had fixed. I have spent a long time being the one who leaves, she said softly. The one who survives by being alone. But today, I held a rope and you climbed it. And 12 kids went home. She looked back at him, her golden eyes fierce and determined. I am tired of running, Caleb. And I think you are too. If this storm wants a fight, I say we give it one. But I am not doing it with the scientists who look at charts. I am doing it with the plumber who knows when the station burps. Caleb looked at her hand on his. He looked at the chip. He took a deep breath, inhaling the smell of stale beer and ozone. Oh, 800 hours, Caleb sighed. I hate mornings. I will bring coffee, Sasha said, a smile touching her eyes. Or whatever it is you humans drink to make your brains work. Coffee, Caleb agreed. Lots of it. Outside, the hollow gale roared a sound of fury and hunger. But for the first time in a long time, the sound didn't make Caleb want to hide in a vent. It sounded like a challenge. And Caleb Hart, the handyman of the Rust Wing, was starting to remember that he used to be pretty good at solving problems. He picked up his beer and clinked it against Sasha's. To the storm, he said. To the idiots who fight it, Sasha replied. They drank and the station trembled beneath them, not in fear, but in anticipation. The conference room on the science deck was a stark contrast to the warm, grime-stained familiarity of the Rust Wing bar. Here, everything was polished chrome, white polymer, and the sterile hum of high-end air filtration. It smelled of antiseptic and anxiety. Caleb Hart stood near the back wall, trying to blend into the brushed metal paneling. He felt exposed without his tool belt, dressed in a clean, standard-issue station jumpsuit that felt 2 sizes too stiff. Beside him, Sasha Nereth leaned against the wall, with her arms crossed her tail, twitching rhythmically against her leg. She looked as out of place as he did a predator in a laboratory. At the front of the room, Arden Imani stood before a massive holographic display. The room was packed with the station's elite structural engineers, atmospheric physicists, and the station commander, a stern woman named Dr. Alvarez, who looked like she had not slept in a week. The situation has evolved, Arden began, his voice tight. He manipulated the hologram with a flick of his wrist. The image of the Nimbus spire appeared a fragile needle of metal, floating in the turbulent atmosphere of Azura. A massive swirling darkness was approaching it. The hollow gale has shifted its axis, Arden explained. Standard models predicted a glancing blow to the lower stabilizers. However, the storm has developed a hyper-compressed pressure ridge. He zoomed in. The storm front wasn't just a cloud. It was a solid wall of kinetic energy, sharpened to a razor's edge by conflicting thermal currents. We are calling it the Blade, Arden said, and it is aiming directly for the spire's primary structural spine. Impact in 4 hours. A murmur of alarm rippled through the room. The automated storm shields can handle that, a senior engineer said dismissively. The deflectors are rated for Category 5 shear. The deflectors are useless, Arden countered sharply. The blade is generating an electrostatic charge of 3 million volts per square meter. It is a massive EMP wave, wrapped in a tornado. The moment it touches our outer grid, the guidance sensors for the deflectors will fry. The shields will not know where to push. The spire will take the full kinetic force of the impact. He overlaid a simulation on the hologram. The blade hit the station. The shields flickered and died. The spire groaned, twisted, and then snapped in half like a dry twig. The upper section tumbled into the crushing depths of the atmosphere. Silence choked the room. It was the silence of people doing math in their heads and realizing the sum was zero. "We cannot evacuate," Dr. Alvarez said, her face pale. "We have 6,000 souls on board. The shuttles cannot fly in this turbulence." "We do not evacuate," Arden said. "We parry." He brought up a schematic of the station's outer hull. The deflector emitters are located on these 6 storm clamp rings encircling the station. If the automated guidance fails, we can manually trigger the pulse generators. We create a cascading pressure wave, a counterpunch that hits the blade before it hits us. We deflect the wind around the station. "Manually," the senior engineer scoffed. "You are talking about sending teams out to the rings in that wind to time a pulse sequence to the millisecond that is impossible. The latency alone." "It is not impossible," a voice said from the back of the room. Every head turned. Caleb stepped forward, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He hated this. He hated the eyes. He hated the attention. But he looked at the schematic on the wall, and he saw the ghost of his past staring back at him. "The pulse generators," Caleb said, his voice gaining strength. "They are not standard issue. They are the Mark IV prototypes, variable frequency emitters." The senior engineer narrowed his eyes. "Who are you, the janitor?" "He is the one who saved the observation pod yesterday," Arden interjected smoothly. "Let him speak." Caleb walked to the front of the room. He looked at the hologram. It was painful how familiar it was. "This isn't a new design," Caleb said, pointing to the rings. "It is a retrofitted Helios grid. I know because I helped write the timing sequence for the original." He tapped the console, overwriting the simulation. He highlighted the manual access ports on the rings. "The system has a backdoor, a hardline maintenance link. You do not need to rely on wireless sensors. You can trigger the pulse by hand at the junction boxes, but you cannot just turn them all on at once. If you do, the feedback loop will shatter the emitters. You have to play them like a piano. Ring 1, 2-second burst. Ring 2, 3-second burst. Overlapping." The room was silent again, but this time it was a different kind of silence. It was the silence of recognition. "Helios," the senior engineer whispered. He stood up, pointing a shaking finger at Caleb. "I know your face. You are Hart. Caleb Hart. You were on the Helios array." The whisper turned into a buzz. "The station that fell. He is the one who miscalculated the load bearing. He killed 300 people." The accusations hit Caleb like physical blows. He flinched his shoulders, hunching defensively. This was the nightmare scenario. This was why he hid in the Rust Wing. "Is this true?" Dr. Alvarez asked, her voice cold. "Are you the engineer responsible for the Helios disaster?" Caleb looked at the floor. He could lie. He could say he was just a junior tech. He could blame the budget cuts or the materials. He looked up. He saw Sasha standing by the wall. She wasn't looking at the floor. She was looking at him, her chin lifted, her eyes challenging him. "Don't run," her eyes said. Caleb took a deep breath. "I was on the team. I was the one who authorized the final shield configuration. And yes, it failed. The station broke." "And you want us to trust you with this station?" the engineer shouted. "You want to go out there and finish the job?" "I want to make sure it does not happen again," Caleb shouted back, surprising even himself. His voice echoed off the steel walls. "I know exactly how the Helios grid failed. I hear it in my nightmares every night. It failed because we trusted the automation. It failed because we were afraid to get our hands dirty when the sensors went blind. I am not telling you I am perfect. I am telling you I am the only person in this room who knows exactly where the weak point is, because I am the one who built it." He looked at Dr. Alvarez. "You can throw me in the brig for my past if you want, Doctor. But right now, you have a storm blade coming for your throat, and I am the only one holding a shield. Let me go out there." The room hung in the balance. The prejudice against his past weighed heavy against the terror of the present. "I will go with him," Sasha's voice cut through the tension. She pushed off the wall and walked to Caleb's side. She looked at the engineers with utter disdain. "I do not know anything about pulse generators or grids," Sasha said, her voice a low growl. "But I know the wind, and if this man says he can deflect it, I believe him. I am the best pilot on this spire, and I am telling you no ship can fly in that. But a person can crawl." She looked at Caleb, and a smirk touched her lips. "Besides, if the wind blows the little engineer away, who is going to do the math for the rest of you? Someone has to hold his leash." It was a joke, but it broke the tension. It reminded them that they were dealing with human beings, not just statistics. "I will go too," a rough voice said. It was Silas, the old miner from the bar. He had been standing near the door, likely dragged in for his EVA expertise. "The kid fixed my extractor fan when no one else could. He has got good hands." "I can handle the comms relay," a young systems tech stammered, raising her hand. Dr. Alvarez looked at the group. She looked at the approaching storm on the monitor. "You have 1 hour," she said. "Get to the airlocks." The outer hull of the Nimbus Spire was a landscape of violence. Caleb was encased in a heavy-duty EVA suit, the magnetic boots clamping to the hull with a reassuring thud clank with every step. But even through the thick layers of polymer and ceramic, he could feel the rage of the hollow gale. It wasn't just wind. It was a physical bombardment. Ionized particles sleeted against his visor like hail. The static charge in the air made his skin crawl, the hair on his arms standing up inside the suit. Above him, the sky was a churning bruise of black and electric violet. "Sound check," Caleb said, his voice trembling slightly in the helmet. "Loud and clear, Hart." Sasha's voice came back calm and steady. "Do not vomit in the mic." They were moving along the maintenance rail of the third storm clamp, a massive ring of structural steel that encircled the station's waist. The plan was madness. 3 teams spread out across the 3 primary rings, facing the storm. They had to reach the manual junction boxes and trigger the emitters in a precise, cascading sequence that Caleb had programmed into their suit chronometers. "Team 2 in position," Silas's voice crackled. "Team 3 standing by," came the voice of another volunteer, a woman from the loading docks. "Team 1 is almost there," Caleb grunted. He was crawling. Walking upright was impossible. The wind shear would have ripped him off the hull like a loose shingle. He was on his hands and knees, dragging his toolbox, checking his tether every 3 seconds. To his left, Sasha moved with an eerie grace. Her suit was modified for her physiology, the tail section armored, and acting as a counterbalance. She wasn't just crawling. She was stalking the storm. She had anchored her safety line to the primary rail and was using her suit's reinforced claws to grip the grating. "Look at the horizon, Caleb," Sasha said. "Here it comes." Caleb looked up. His breath caught in his throat. The blade was visible now. It wasn't a cloud. It was a vertical wall of darkness stretching from the cloud layer below to the upper atmosphere. It pulsed with blue lightning that looked like veins in a muscle. It was silent in the vacuum of space, but the vibration of its approach made his teeth ache. 2 minutes to impact, Arden's voice came from the control room. "Hart, you are cutting it close." "I am moving as fast as I can," Caleb snapped. "This rail is iced over." He reached the junction box. It was a heavy industrial panel located on the outer curve of the ring. He locked his knees, engaged his mag boots to maximum, and pulled the release lever. The wind roared a sound transmitted through the station's hull into his body. "Okay," Caleb panted. "I am at the interface. Team 2, get ready on my mark. We need a 3-second pulse, then immediate cutoff. If you hold it too long, the capacitors blow." "Copy that," Silas said. "Team 3, you follow 2 seconds later. 5-second burst." "Copy." "Team 1, that is us," Caleb muttered to himself. We are the trigger. He opened the panel. The interior was a complex array of switches and dials. He plugged his datapad into the diagnostic port. "Caleb," Sasha said urgently. "Look at Team 2. Caleb turned his head. 50 meters down the hull on the lower ring, he saw the small figure of Silas. But Silas wasn't at the box. He was flailing. "His tether!" Sasha shouted. "The wind shear snapped the guide rail." Silas was sliding. His mag boots were sparking, trying to find purchase on the slick, iced-over hull. But the force of the wind was dragging him toward the edge, toward the drop into the crushing depths. "He is going to go over!" Caleb yelled. "I cannot reach him!" Silas panicked over the comms. "My suit, the servos are locked, I am slipping!" Caleb looked at the chronometer. 90 seconds to impact. If he went down to help Silas, he would miss the timing window. The blade would hit. The station would fall. "The numbers are turning red," his mind whispered. "Just like Helios. You have to choose. The many or the one." At Helios, he had frozen. He had tried to save everyone and saved no one. Caleb looked at Silas, sliding closer to the abyss. He looked at the storm. "Sasha," Caleb said, his voice deadly calm. "Trigger the sequence." "What?" "I am going for him. You trigger the pulse. The code is 77 Alpha." "Caleb, you will not make it back in time," Sasha screamed. "When the pulse fires, the recoil will shake this ring apart." "Do it!" Caleb didn't wait. He detached his safety line from the primary rail and clipped it to the emergency rappel line on his belt. He didn't crawl this time. He jumped. He launched himself off the upper ring, diving through the ion storm toward the lower section. It was a suicide maneuver. The wind caught him, spinning him like a rag doll. The world became a blur of blue lightning and gray metal. He slammed into the lower hull, the impact knocking the wind out of him. His suit alarms screamed. He scrambled claws of his gloves, screeching against the metal, sliding down the curve. Silas was 10 feet away, his boots hanging over the edge, his fingers slipping from a rivet. Caleb lunged. He grabbed Silas's wrist just as the miner lost his grip. The weight hit Caleb hard. He slammed into the railing, his arm nearly pulled from its socket. He groaned, gritting his teeth. "I got you!" Caleb yelled. "I got you, old man!" "You idiot!" Silas gasped. "The sequence." "Sasha," Caleb screamed into the comms. "Now, fire it now." In the upper ring, Sasha didn't hesitate. She punched the code into the box. "Kathum!" The first pulse fired. A massive ring of blue energy erupted from the station's emitters. The recoil was instantaneous. The entire Nimbus spire shuddered, as if it had been kicked by a god. Caleb lost his grip on the railing. He and Silas were thrown outward, dangling over 5 miles of empty sky held only by Caleb's thin emergency line connected to the upper ring. The wind battered them. They were pendulums in a hurricane. Team 2 fire. Sasha commanded, taking over the count. Below them, the second ring flared. The pressure wave hit the approaching blade. Caleb watched, suspended in the void, as the wall of the storm collided with their man-made shield. It was blinding. A collision of nature and engineering. The air buckled. The blade didn't break, but it bent. The force was diverted, sliding sideways along the station's length, instead of cutting through it. The sound was beyond hearing. It was a vibration that rattled Caleb's bones. "We did it," Silas wheezed, hanging below Caleb. "It is turning." But the violence wasn't over. The deflection caused a backdraft of vacuum snap. The station lurched violently to the left. The sudden motion whipped Caleb and Silas around. Caleb's line, stressed beyond its limit, began to fray. He heard the snap, snap, snap of fibers parting. "The line!" Caleb yelled. "It is giving way." He looked up. The attachment point was 30 feet above, shrouded in steam and static. There was no way to climb. The winch was jammed. "Caleb!" Sasha's voice was frantic. "I see you, I am coming." "Stay back," Caleb shouted. "The structure is unstable. If you come out on the overhang, you will fall too." This is it, Caleb thought. This is the penance. He had survived Helios when others died. Now he would die so the spire could live. It felt mathematically correct. The line gave one final sickening lurch. One strand left, flashback. The control room at Helios. The darkness. The cold. The feeling of being utterly, completely alone. The terror rose up, a black tide choking him. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. He was falling. He was always falling. Caleb Hart. The voice wasn't in his head. It was in his ear, furious, commanding. "Look at me!" Caleb forced his eyes open. He looked up. Sasha was there. She wasn't on the railing. She had leaped. She was hanging upside down, her legs locked around a structural strut, her tail wrapped tight like a third limb. She was extended to her absolute limit, her hand reaching down into the void. "Reach!" she roared. The wind tore at her fur, her mask of a pilot gone, replaced by pure, desperate will. "Do not you dare die on me, plumber who is going to fix my ceiling." The absurdity of it pierced through the panic. The ceiling, the beer, the kill you alive. Caleb wasn't the engineer of Helios anymore. He was Caleb from the Rust Wing, and his friend was asking him to stay. He swung his body, fighting the G-forces. He reached up. The last strand of the rope snapped. For a heartbeat, he was free falling. Then, a hand clamped around his wrist. Iron strong. Claws dug into the reinforced fabric of his suit. Sasha screamed with the effort, her back arching, her muscles straining against the weight of two men. "I have you," she snarled. Slowly, agonizingly, she pulled. She used the leverage of her tail, the strength of her Falari physiology. She hauled Caleb up, who was still holding Silas. A human chain of stubbornness against the gravity of a planet. She dragged them onto the grating. They collapsed in a heap of limbs and metal safety lines tangling. Above them, the storm raged, but the blade had passed. The main body of the hollow gale was sweeping harmlessly past the station, deflected by the pulse. The lights on the station died. Total darkness enveloped them, save for the blue lightning of the storm. Then, one by one, the emergency floods flickered on. Amber, then white. The station hummed. It was a wounded sound, a groaning of metal settling, but it was steady. The heartbeat was still there. Caleb lay on his back, staring up at the sky. His chest heaved. Every muscle in his body felt liquefied. Sasha was lying next to him, her helmet touching his. She was panting, a harsh, rasping sound over the comms. "You," she wheezed. "You are heavy," Caleb laughed. It was a hysterical, broken sound, somewhere between a sob and a chuckle. "It is the guilt. It adds 10 pounds. Sasha turned her head inside her helmet. Her eyes were wide, the pupils blown. She looked terrified and exhilaratingly alive. "You jumped," she said. "You abandoned the plan." "The plan worked," Caleb whispered. "And Silas is still here." "You could have died." "I know." Sasha was silent for a moment. Then she whispered, "Me too. I almost let go." "Why didn't you?" "Because," she said, her voice fierce again. "I told you. I only kill people alive. Dropping them is too easy." "Team 1, Arden's voice broke through, sounding stunned. "Report. Status." Caleb fumbled for his transmit button. His fingers were numb. "Team 1 here," he rasped. We are all here. The plumbing holds." "Confirmed," Arden said, and Caleb could hear the cheering in the background. "The spire is stable. The storm is tracking away. You did it, Hart. You turned the wind." They lay there for another minute, just breathing, letting the adrenaline fade into exhaustion. The storm was beautiful now, a receding monster that had bowed to them. Eventually, they stumbled back to the airlock. It was a slow, painful procession. When the inner door cycled open and the pressure equalization hissed, Caleb pulled off his helmet. He sank to his knees, sweat dripping from his nose. His hands were shaking uncontrollably. The corridor was full of people. Medics, engineers, the volunteers. They were all staring. Not with suspicion this time, but with awe. Caleb looked up. He didn't look at Arden. He didn't look at the cheering crowd. He looked at Silas, who was sitting against the wall, getting his arm checked by a medic. "Hey, Silas," Caleb croaked. The old miner looked up. "You owe me a beer," Caleb said. Silas laughed, a wheezing, hacking cough. "I owe you the whole damn bar, kid." Sasha pulled her helmet off. Her fur was matted with sweat, her ears drooping with exhaustion. She leaned against the wall, sliding down until she was sitting next to Caleb. Their shoulders touched. "Is everyone in?" Caleb asked, looking around the group. "Team 2, Team 3. "We are all here, Caleb," the woman from Team 3 said softly. She looked at him like she was seeing a ghost come back to life. "Everyone came back," Caleb nodded. He closed his eyes, leaning his head back against the cold metal wall. "Good. That is good." But as the cheers died down and the reality set in, the whispers started again. They were different whispers now. "That was not just engineering," someone murmured. "Did you see him jump?" "Who is he really? A guy like that does not just fix pipes." Caleb opened his eyes. He saw the looks. They were grateful, yes. But they were also curious. The mask of the handyman had been shattered out there on the hull. He was a hero now, and heroes didn't get to hide in the dark. He looked at Sasha. She was watching him, a sad, knowing smile on her face. "Trouble is just starting, isn't it?" she whispered. "Yeah," Caleb said, looking at his scarred hands. "I think the easy part was fighting the storm." The days following the storm were a blur of noise light and a suffocating amount of gratitude. The Nimbus Spire, usually a place of grim routine and quiet desperation, had erupted into a carnival of relief. Banners hung from the upper gantries, painted on repurposed sailcloth, with industrial spray paint. One particularly large one draped over the main promenade read, "The storm ate dust thanks to the plumber and the cat." The Rustwing Bar was no longer just a watering hole. It was a pilgrimage site. "Another round for the savior of the Spire," a miner bellowed, slamming a fistful of credits onto the bar. Caleb Hart flinched. He was standing behind the bar, wiping a glass that was already clean. He forced a smile that felt like it was made of cracking plaster. "It was a group effort, Tarek," Caleb said, sliding a beer down the counter. "I just pushed the button." "Ha, he is humble too," Tarek shouted to the room. "Hear that he jumps into a hurricane to save old Silas, and he says he just pushed a button." The room cheered. Caleb looked down at his hands. The knuckles were still bruised, the skin raw from the cold of the vacuum. He felt like an imposter in his own life. In the corner booth, Sasha Nareth sat watching him. She wasn't drinking. She was peeling the label off a bottle of water, her amber eyes tracking Caleb's every micro-expression. She saw the tightness in his jaw. She saw the way he scanned the exits every time the door opened. She knew that look. It was the look of a survivor who was waiting for the other shoe to drop. "Hey," Juno said, nudging Caleb with her elbow. She was mixing a drink that was glowing a radioactive green. "Smile, hero. We have sold more beer in 3 days than we did in the last 6 months. Garen is thinking of renaming the place the Stormbreaker." "Please, tell him not to," Caleb muttered. "I like Rustwing. It sounds broken. Broken is honest." "You are a buzzkill, Hart," Juno said, but her voice was gentle. She slid a data slate across the counter to him. "Check this out. Someone made a cocktail named after you. The Caleb Calamity. It is whiskey, hot sauce, and a shot of engine coolant." "That sounds like it would kill you," Caleb said. "That is the point," Juno grinned. "It hits you hard, shakes you up, but you survive it." Caleb didn't laugh. Survive it. That was the problem. He had survived. Again. The door to the bar hissed open. A group of off-duty technicians walked in. But the atmosphere changed. It wasn't the boisterous cheer of the miners. It was quieter, sharper. One of them, a man with the insignia of the Archive Division, walked up to the bar. He didn't order a drink. He placed a printed broadsheet on the counter. It was an old news file. The date was 5 years ago. The headline screamed in bold red letters, "Helios Array Collapse, Engineer Negligence, Cited in Sector 4 Tragedy." Below the headline was a grainy photo of a younger Caleb, looking shell-shocked and covered in dust being pulled from the wreckage. "Is this you?" the technician asked. His voice wasn't accusatory, just cold. "We pulled the archives after the commander mentioned your name. Caleb Hart, lead structural analyst." The bar went quiet. The cheering stopped. Tarek the miner lowered his glass. Caleb stared at the photo. He could smell the smoke of Helios. He could hear the screams that weren't in the picture. "Yes," Caleb said. His voice was steady but dead. "That is me." "It says here you miscalculated the shear stress," the technician said, tapping the paper. "It says you ignored 3 safety warnings because you thought the grid could hold." Caleb started, then stopped. What could he say? That the warnings were contradictory, that the sensors were lying, that he had made a call based on bad data. "He saved this station," Silas's voice boomed from a table. The old miner stood up, looking shaky but fierce. "I do not care what he did 5 years ago. He pulled me out of the void 3 days ago. That counts for something." "Does it?" another voice asked from the back. "If he broke one station, who is to say he won't break this one? Maybe we just got lucky this time. Maybe next time his math is wrong again." The room was divided. The hero narrative was cracking, revealing the ugly, fearful scar tissue underneath. The gratitude was curdling into suspicion. It was the nature of fear. Once the immediate danger was gone, people needed someone to blame for the fact that they had been afraid in the first place. Caleb looked around the room. He saw the doubt in their eyes. He saw the way they looked at his hands, hands that could fix, but also hands that could destroy. "I need a break," Caleb said. He untied his apron and dropped it on the bar. He didn't look at Juno. He didn't look at Sasha. He walked out the back door, into the cold, metallic labyrinth of the service corridors. He ended up in his quarters, a small, windowless box on the lower maintenance deck. It was sparse. A cot, a locker, a table covered in spare parts. No photos, no mementos. He sat on the edge of the cot staring at the wall. The silence was deafening. 312, his mind whispered. "You saved 6,000 this time. Does that balance the ledger? Number dead is dead. You cannot do math with lives." A knock on the door startled him. It was a soft, rhythmic scratching. "Go away, Juno," Caleb said. "I am not Juno," a raspy voice replied. "And I have food." The door slid open. Sasha stood there holding a takeout container from the station's noodle bar. She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, the door sealing behind her. "You look like garbage," she stated, placing the container on his table. "Thanks," Caleb said, rubbing his face. "I feel like garbage." "Eat," she commanded. "It is spicy arachnid noodle soup. It clears the sinuses and the self-pity." Caleb picked up a spoon, stirring the broth listlessly. "They are right, you know. The article. I made the call. I was the one who overrode the safeties." "And the station fell," Sasha said, sitting on his locker. Her tail curled around her feet. "I know. I read it too." Caleb looked up hurt, flashing in his eyes. "So you are here to tell me to be careful next time?" "No," Sasha said. She leaned forward, her amber eyes intense. "I am here to tell you that newspapers are written by people who were not there. People who sit in safe rooms and judge the ones who were standing in the fire." She pointed a claw at him. "You think you are the only one 2 years ago when I got the name Deadliest. Do you know the real story?" Caleb shook his head. "It was a transport run," Sasha said, her voice dropping. "We were hit by a swarm of ion leeches. Nasty little energy parasites. They were draining the ship's core. We were going to drop out of the sky. The captain wanted to jettison the cargo hold. The hold was full of refugees from the border wars. 50 people. Caleb stopped stirring his soup. I said no, Sasha continued. I locked the captain in his quarters. Mutiny. I went out on the hull with a plasma torch and fought the leeches off by hand. I cut the heavy cargo, the ore, the expensive equipment loose to lighten the load. We made it back. But because I cut the ore, the company lost millions. And because I fought on the hull, the ship took damage. 3 crew members died in the instability. She looked away. The report said I was reckless, that I endangered the mission parameters. It said my actions led to crew fatalities. It did not mention the 50 refugees. So now I am the deadliest. The pilot who kills her crew and throws money into space. Caleb stared at her. He saw the pain behind the predator's mask. He saw the weight she carried just as heavy as his own. They did not mention the refugees, Caleb asked. Footnote. Sasha shrugged. Bottom of page 4. Civilian assets preserved. Caleb laughed. It was a dry, bitter sound, but it felt real. Civilian assets. That is what they call people. We are monsters to them, Caleb, Sasha said softly. You are the breaker of stations. I am the killer of crews. Because it is easier to label us than to understand the choices we had to make. She hopped off the locker and walked over to him. She placed a hand on his shoulder. But here is the thing, she said. Those refugees. They send me cards every cycle. They send me pictures of their kids. And those kids you saved yesterday. They do not care about Sector 4. They care that they are eating dinner tonight. Caleb looked at her hand. It was strong, scarred, covered in soft fur. It was a hand that had held him over the abyss. I am scared, Sasha, he whispered. I am scared that I am just lucky. That one day my luck will run out and I will kill everyone here. Then be scared, Sasha said. Fear keeps you sharp, but do not do it alone. She reached into the pocket of her cargo pants and pulled out 2 bottles, Old Earth Stout. I brought backup, she said. But be careful. Last time I drank this, I sneezed and the foam went up my nose. It burned for an hour. Caleb smiled. A real smile this time. You have sensitive sinuses for a lethal predator. Shut up and drink your beer, plumber. He took the bottle. He poured hers carefully into a mug he grabbed from the shelf, tilting it to minimize the head. Less foam, he said, handing it to her. For the safety of the deadly Catwoman. Sasha took the mug, her eyes crinkling. You are learning. They sat in the small room eating spicy noodles and drinking cheap stout. They didn't talk about storms or disasters. They talked about the terrible music in the Rustwing jukebox. They talked about how much Sasha hated the smell of lavender air freshener. They laughed, 2 broken people finding a way to fit their jagged pieces together. The next morning, the mood on the station began to shift again. It wasn't a sudden change, but a slow tide turning. It started in the mess hall. Caleb walked in to get coffee, bracing himself for the whispers. A man stood up. It was the father of the girl who had asked about the roller coaster. He walked over to Caleb. The room went quiet. The man didn't say anything. He just extended his hand. My daughter drew a picture of you, the man said. She drew you with a cape. I told her you should wear a jumpsuit, but she insisted on the cape. Caleb shook the man's hand. Tell her capes to get caught in turbines. But thank you. I heard about the news report, the man said, loud enough for the table behind him to hear. I do not know about Helios, but I know my daughter is alive because you went out there. If anyone gives you trouble, you send them to me. And to me, Silas said, limping over with his tray. I was on that rail. I saw him jump. You do not jump into a void to save an old man if you are a coward. Throughout the day, it kept happening. A nod from a security guard. A free pastry from the baker. A thumbs up from a group of teenagers. The social shield was forming. The people Caleb had touched with his small acts of kindness, the fixed heaters, the unclogged drains, the saved lives, were standing up against the abstract ghost of his past. They were judging him on the man he was now. Meanwhile, in the science division, Arden Imani was on a warpath. "This is garbage," Arden shouted, throwing a data slate onto his desk. "The official inquiry on Helios is a joke. It is a cover-up." Juno, who was sitting on a lab stool, looked at the screen. "What did you find?" "I pulled the raw telemetry logs," Arden said, his eyes feverish behind his glasses. "Not the summary report, the raw data. The sensors in Sector 4 didn't just fail. They were sabotaged." "Sabotaged?" Juno asked. "By who? By the budget," Arden spat. "Look at this. The dampeners were rated for a Class 3 storm. The paperwork says they were upgraded to Class 5. But the energy signatures are Class 3 dampeners. Someone pocketed the upgrade money and signed off on the safety checks." "And they pinned it on Caleb," Juno whispered. "Because he was the one who signed the final activation order." "He was activating a system that was built to fail," Arden said. "He kept it running for 12 minutes past critical failure. Juno, do you know what that means? He manually balanced a collapsing grid for 12 minutes. He didn't kill those people. He bought them time to get to the escape pods. If he hadn't done what he did, the whole station would have gone, not just Sector 4. "We have to tell him," Juno said, standing up. "We have to prove it," Arden said. "I need the encrypted comms logs. I need to know who signed the procurement order." He looked at Juno. "Can you get me into the archive core?" Juno cracked her knuckles. "I dated a guy in IT for 3 weeks. I know his password is password 123. Let's go hack a government database." That evening, Caleb and Sasha stood on their favorite balcony on level 82. The storm had passed, leaving the sky a clear, deep indigo. The stars were visible sharp and cold. Caleb leaned on the railing, looking down at the clouds. He felt lighter. Not healed, but lighter. "I was thinking," Caleb said, "about what you said. About running." "Yeah," Sasha asked, her ears swiveling toward him. "If Helios hadn't happened," he said. "If I hadn't failed, or whatever I did, I would be a lead engineer on a core world right now. I would be living in a climate-controlled dome, drinking wine that costs more than this station." "Sounds boring," Sasha said. "No wind." "It does sound boring," Caleb admitted. "And I wouldn't have met you. I wouldn't know Juno. I wouldn't know how to fix a coolant leak with duct tape and chewing gum." He turned to face her. "I lost a lot when that station fell. But I think I found something here. Something worth keeping." "The beer," Sasha teased. "The view," Caleb said, looking directly at her. Sasha went still. Her tail stopped twitching. She looked at him, searching his face. "Caleb," she said softly, "you know I am not like the girls in the Hollow films. I have claws. I have baggage. I hiss when I am startled." "I have scars," Caleb said. "I have nightmares. I hide in ceilings." He reached out and took her hand. "We are a pair, the monster and the coward." Sasha looked down at their joined hands. A human hand scarred and rough. A Filari hand furred and lethal. They fit together perfectly. "The station is safe," Sasha said. "But the people are still talking. They still wonder who you are." "Let them talk," Caleb said. "I am done hiding. Arden offered me a job. A real job. Consult on the new shield upgrades. Teach the emergency response team." "Are you going to take it?" "I think so," Caleb said. "But only if I can keep my shifts at the Rust Wing. I am not giving up the free beer." Sasha laughed, a sound that was pure and unburdened. "You are an idiot, Hart." "Yeah," Caleb smiled. "But I am your idiot." The door to the balcony burst open. They jumped apart, Caleb's hand flying to his belt, where a wrench usually was, Sasha's hand flying to her hip, where her blaster was. It was Arden. He was out of breath, his lab coat flapping, clutching a data slate like it was a holy relic. Juno was right behind him, looking triumphant. "Caleb," Arden gasped. "Sasha, do not kiss or anything gross yet. You need to see this." "We were not kissing," Sasha hissed, her fur puffing up. We were discussing structural integrity. Whatever, Arden said, waving his hand. He shoved the data slate into Caleb's chest. Read this. The logs. The procurement orders. We found it. Caleb looked at the screen. He saw the numbers. He saw the names. He saw the truth that had been buried under 5 years of guilt and concrete. Dampener grade, Class 3. Substandard. Override authorization denied. Manual stabilization C. Heart. Duration, 732 seconds. Casualty projection, without stabilization, 100%. Actual casualties, 12%. Caleb read it twice. His hands started to shake again. I didn't kill them, he whispered. You saved the other 88%, Arden said fiercely. You held the door open while the house was burning down, Caleb. And the guy who bought the cheap dampeners, he is the one who wrote the report blaming you. Sasha looked over Caleb's shoulder. Her eyes narrowed. And look here, she pointed to a subfile. The incident report on the deadliest run. It is linked. The same shipping company. The same insurance adjuster. They framed us, Sasha growled. Both of us. To save their profit margins. Caleb looked up from the screen. The guilt that had been a stone in his gut for 5 years didn't vanish, but it cracked. Light shone through. I held it, he said, his voice choking. I held it for 12 minutes. You are a damn good engineer, Caleb, Juno said softly. And an even better hero. Caleb looked at Sasha. She was grinning a sharp, predatory grin that promised retribution. So, Sasha said, we have the truth. We have the proof. And we have a station full of people who owe you a drink. What do you want to do? Caleb asked her. Sasha looked at the data slate, then at the station below them. I think, she said, it is time we go tell the Spire a new story. A story about a plumber, a cat, and some very expensive lawsuits. Caleb laughed. He laughed until tears ran down his face. He wrapped his arm around Sasha's shoulders, and for the first time, she leaned into him, purring a deep, rhythmic sound like a well-tuned engine. Let's go, Caleb said. I think Garen needs to open the good whiskey. The datapad sat on the metal table between them, like a grenade with the pin pulled. It was not glowing. It was not making a sound, but the information contained within it had the power to detonate 5 years of silence. Arden Imani stood by the door of the small briefing room, looking exhausted, but triumphant. Beside him, Juno was practically vibrating with energy, her hands stained with the ink of printed schematics she had dragged out of the physical archives. Caleb Hart stared at the screen. The blue light reflected in his eyes, washing out the gray of his irises. Read it again, Sasha Nereth said softly. She was standing behind his chair, her hand resting on his shoulder, her claws retracted. Out loud, Caleb cleared his throat. It felt like he was swallowing broken glass. System log Helios Array Sector 4, Caleb read, his voice trembling. Timestamp 0800. Primary dampeners failing. Structural collapse imminent. Evacuation protocols initiated. Automated containment failure at 0810. He paused. This was the part he remembered. This was the part where he thought he had panicked, where he thought he had hit the wrong sequence in a desperate bid to be a hero. Keep reading, Arden urged gently. Manual override engaged by C. Hart, Caleb read. System lock bypassing safety protocols. Hydraulic stress redirected to the central hub. Field integrity maintained for 132 seconds. Caleb stopped. He stared at the number. 132 seconds. 2 minutes and 12 seconds, Juno said. That is how long you held the door open, Caleb. Do you know how long it takes for a standard escape pod to cycle and launch? Caleb shook his head, his mind reeling. 40 seconds, Juno said. In those 132 seconds, 3 transport shuttles cleared the launch tubes. That is nearly 2,000 people. Caleb let out a breath that shuddered through his entire frame. He remembered the screaming metal. He remembered the heat rising in the control room as the conduits melted around him. He remembered thinking, I am not doing enough. I am not fast enough. But the report, Caleb whispered. The news. They said I overrode the safeties and caused the surge. They said my calculation broke the spine. Your calculation broke the spine, Arden corrected, stepping forward to tap a section of the log. But look at the simulation data we recovered. If you hadn't broken the spine manually to vent the pressure, the entire reactor core would have gone critical. The explosion would have vaporized the whole station. You sacrificed Sector 4 to save the other 3 sectors. Arden's face hardened. The company that built the dampeners knew they were faulty. They needed a scapegoat. It is easier to blame a rogue engineer who made a bad call than to admit they installed budget hardware that couldn't handle a summer breeze. They buried this log, Caleb. They buried the fact that you stayed behind in a burning room to buy time for strangers. Caleb put his face in his hands. For 5 years he had walked around with the weight of ghosts on his back. He had counted the dead in his sleep. He had fixed pipes and cleaned toilets because he felt he didn't deserve to touch anything important ever again. And all this time the ghosts hadn't been haunting him. They thanked him. He felt a wetness on his palms. He was crying silent, shaking sobs that racked his body. Sasha leaned down, wrapping her arms around his neck, pressing her cheek against his hair. She didn't say anything. She just held him, letting him fall apart so he could finally put himself back together. 132 seconds. Caleb gasped, half laughing, half choking. I thought I just froze. I thought I was just slow. You were stubborn, Sasha murmured. Just like you were on the rail. You do not let go. Arden waited for the moment to settle before he cleared his throat again. He looked at Sasha. There is more, Arden said. While I was digging through the corporate liability files of the shipping conglomerate that owned the Helios contract, I found a cross-reference. A flagged personnel file from 2 years ago. He swiped the screen of the datapad. A new document appeared. It was a disciplinary report from the Stellar Navy. The subject line read, Incident Report Transport Vessel Aegis. Pilot S. Nareth. Sasha went stiff against Caleb's back. Her tail lashed once sharply. You found the butcher's bill, Sasha said, her voice turning cold. The reason they call me the deadliest. I found the cargo manifest, Arden said. He looked at her with a new kind of respect. The official story, the one the rumors are based on, says you disobeyed a direct order from your captain to jettison compromised cargo during a biological attack. It says you engaged in unauthorized combat resulting in severe damage to the ship and the loss of 3 security officers. That is the story, Sasha said flatly. I killed my own team to play hero. The compromised cargo, Arden read from the manifest, was listed as Class C organic assets. That is corporate code for undocumented refugees. 52 of them, mostly children from the border colonies. Caleb turned in his chair, looking up at Sasha. 52, Sasha looked away, her jaw tight. The creature's storm wraiths were latching onto the hull. They were heavy. The ship was dragging. The captain did not want to lose the ore we were hauling. It was platinum grade. So he ordered the rear compartment purged. He called it ballast. So you didn't just disobey, Arden said. You mutinied. I broke his nose, Sasha said with a shrug. And then I went outside. I cut the ore containers loose. Millions of credits of platinum gone into the void. The ship got lighter. We outran the wraiths. But the security team tried to stop me. The wraiths got them while we were fighting on the hull. She looked down at her hands, the claws retracting and extending rhythmically. I saved the refugees, she whispered. But the soldiers died because I was busy cutting loose the money. If I had been faster, if I had just flown better. You made a choice, Caleb said, standing up. He took her hands in his. You chose the people over the profit, and the company branded you a monster because you cost them their platinum. They called it gross negligence, Sasha said. They stripped my rank. They spread the rumor that I was unstable. She is deadliest, they said. She will kill you alive. It was a warning to other captains. Do not hire her. She will throw your cargo away to save a peasant. Caleb looked at her. He saw the mirror of his own pain. Two people defined by the worst days of their lives, lied about by people who only cared about the bottom line. We are quite a pair, Caleb said, a small, genuine smile breaking through his tears. The engineer who breaks stations and the pilot who steals platinum. We should start a club, Sasha said, her voice wobbling. No captains allowed. No, Caleb said. We should start a new story. He turned to Arden. Can I keep this, the log? It is yours, Arden said. And the original data is already being uploaded to the public newsfeed of the Nimbus Spire. Juno hacked the bulletin board 5 minutes ago. I did, Juno grinned from the corner. I titled it, The Truth About the Plumber. It is currently trending higher than the Gravball scores. Caleb took a deep breath. He felt the phantom weight on his chest dissolve, replaced by a clean, sharp resolve. Dr. Alvarez offered me a position, Caleb said. Lead meteorological engineer. She wants me to redesign the storm shields. Are you going to take it? Sasha asked. I am, Caleb said. On one condition. I want my own team. And I want to handpick the emergency response pilot. He looked at Sasha. I hear there is a Catwoman on the station who is pretty good with a winch. But she is expensive. She charges in beer. Sasha smiled. It was not the predatory grin of the bar. It was soft, open, and beautiful. I think she can be persuaded, Sasha said, if the benefits package includes ceiling repairs. The weeks that followed were a time of transformation for the Nimbus Spire. The story of the 132 seconds spread through the station like wildfire. The graffiti in the lower decks changed. The crude drawings of Caleb as a villain were painted over with murals of a man holding up a collapsing ceiling. Caleb Hart did not wear a cape. He wore a crisp, new engineer's uniform with the Science Division insignia on the shoulder. But he wore it differently than the other officers. He wore it with the sleeves rolled up, revealing his scarred arms. And every evening at 1800 hours, he clocked out, walked down to the rust wing, and put on his apron. You do not have to work here anymore, Caleb, Garen had told him. You are a big shot now. You are designing the new deflector array. I like the noise, Garen, Caleb had replied. And I like beer. Besides, if I leave, who is going to keep the jukebox from playing that terrible synth pop on repeat? Sasha changed too. She didn't stop being dangerous. She was still the pilot who could thread a needle in a hurricane, but the ice around her melted. One afternoon in the Central Plaza, a group of Filari kittens were chasing a mechanical mouse. One of them, a tiny gray thing, tripped and landed hard on its tail. Before the mother could react, Sasha was there. She scooped the kitten up, checking the limb with gentle, practiced hands. You are okay, little warrior, Sasha murmured, grooming the dust off the kitten's fur with her thumb. Keep your tail up for balance, like this. A group of miners watched, mouths agape. The deadliest was giving hugging lessons. When she stood up and saw them staring, she didn't hiss. She just raised an eyebrow. What? She challenged. Even monsters like soft things. The rumors began to shift. She is deadliest, they said, but only if you are a storm. If you are a kid, she is just a really big cat. 6 months later, the Rust Wing was packed. It was a Friday night, and the air smelled of hops, ozone, and victory. The new storm shields, the Heart Array, as the locals called them, had just weathered their first major gale, without a single fluctuation in power. Caleb was behind the bar, pouring 3 drafts at once. He looked tired, but it was good. The tired of work that mattered. The door hissed open. A newcomer walked in. He was a young mercenary fresh from the core worlds, with a shiny blaster and an attitude to match. He scanned the room, and his eyes landed on the corner booth. Sasha was there reading a datapad and eating a bowl of spicy noodles. She looked up, her golden eyes flashing. The mercenary froze. He nudged the person next to him. Hey, the merc whispered loudly. Is that her, the Catwoman? I heard stories about her in the sector. They say she is the deadliest thing on two legs. They say she will kill you alive just for looking at her wrong." Caleb stopped wiping the counter. He looked at the merc, then at Sasha. Sasha looked back at Caleb. She slowly licked a drop of spicy broth from her lip. "Is she dangerous?" the merc asked Caleb, leaning over the bar. Caleb set down his rag. He leaned in, matching the merc's conspiratorial tone. "Dangerous," Caleb said. "Let me tell you. I once saw her take down a Class 5 ion wraith with a wrench because it scratched her ship's paint job." The merc's eyes went wide. "But," Caleb continued, a grin spreading across his face, "she is mostly deadly to Bully's bad weather and my inventory of stouts. If you are polite, the worst she will do is beat you at arm wrestling and make you pay for the nachos." Sasha snorted from her booth. "I heard that, plumber, and for that you owe me a refill." "Coming right up," Caleb called back. He grabbed 2 bottles of Old Earth Stout. He walked out from behind the bar, not as a servant, but as the owner of the room. He slid into the booth opposite Sasha. "You are ruining my reputation," Sasha complained, though her tail was curling happily around his ankle under the table. "How am I supposed to intimidate the rookies if you tell them I like nachos?" "Intimidation is overrated," Caleb said, clinking his bottle against hers. "Respect is better, and beer is best." "To the Heart Array," Sasha toasted. "To the Platinum Mutiny," Caleb replied. They drank, surrounded by the noise of life, 2 people who had found shelter in the eye of the storm. Later that night, they stood on the observation deck of Level 82. It was their spot, the place where they had shared that first silence. Below them, the planet Azura churned. The hollow gale was down there, a swirling mass of violence and beauty. But it looked different now. It didn't look like a monster coming to eat them. It just looked like weather. The new shield emitters on the outer ring hummed with a low, steady frequency, a song of protection that Caleb had written note by note. "It is quiet tonight," Sasha said, leaning her head on Caleb's shoulder. "The wind is still blowing," Caleb said. "We just learned how to stand in it." He looked at his reflection in the reinforced glass. He didn't see the tired, haunted man from the file photo anymore. He saw a man who had made mistakes, yes, but who had stayed to fix them. "You know," Caleb said thoughtfully. "For a long time I thought strength was about control, about building walls so thick that nothing could hurt you. I thought if I could just calculate every variable I would be safe." "And now?" Sasha asked. Caleb looked at her. He looked at the scar on her ear, the dust on her flight boots, the fierce, unwavering light in her eyes. "Now I think strength is just stepping out the door," Caleb said. "It is knowing that the storm is bigger than you, that the math might fail, and that your hands might shake. But you step out anyway. Because there is someone on the other side who needs a hand." Sasha nodded. She reached out and traced the line of the window, where the shield grid glowed faint blue. "And," she added softly, "it is being willing to let someone else catch you when you fall, even if you are the deadliest thing on the spire." "Especially then," Caleb said. He wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her close. The station vibrated beneath their feet, a tiny metallic island in a sea of chaos. It was fragile. It was temporary, but it was home. "Come on," Sasha said, pulling away gently. "Arden is organizing a karaoke night in the science lab. He says he has data proving he can sing." "That is a lie," Caleb laughed. "I heard him hum. It violates several laws of acoustics." "We should go record it," Sasha said, her eyes gleaming with mischief. "For blackmail purposes." "Lead the way, pilot," Caleb said. They walked away from the window, leaving the storm behind them. And so the legend grew. Newcomers to the Nimbus Spire would be told the story as soon as they landed. They would be told about the storm that almost broke the world. They would be told about the Great Shake and the blue fire that turned the wind. But mostly, they would be told about the 2 people who saved them. "You see that guy a miner would say, pointing to the man laughing behind the bar at the Rustwing. He looks like a plumber. But he held the door open for 132 seconds, while hell was breaking loose. And the miner, would gesture to the Falari woman arguing with him about the music. They say she is the deadliest creature in the sector. She will kill you alive. Really? The newcomer would ask, trembling. Oh yes, the miner would grin. She will kill you with kindness. Just don't touch her tail. And whatever you do, do not let them drink alone. Because on the Nimbus Spire, everyone knew the truth. The station wasn't held up by steel beams or magnetic fields. It was held up by the stubbornness of a man who refused to run and the courage of a cat who refused to leave him behind.